Uta Frith. Dame Uta Frith, no less. One of the 20th century's most renowned autism experts has just U-turned on her entire career. Nothing less than taking a wrecking ball to her lifetime's crowning achievement. In the last couple of months, she's gone on record in numerous venues saying that she now thinks that the autism spectrum she devoted decades of her life to shaping and promoting is a load of old cobblers. What a way to alienate vast swathes of the autistic community and throw a growing pile of distinguished colleagues and students under the bus at the same time. Not to mention, a great strategy for confusing the living daylights out of the general public. From a career started in the 1960s, Uta Frith was a major force in the drive to reclassify autism as a spectrum condition until her retirement in 2006, broadening both the category and our understanding of what makes autistic people different. She's remained largely in the background for those 20 years since retiring, occasionally offering commentary and insight when asked, like many ageing experts do, but she's not been an active voice in the community. Until a couple of months ago, when she suddenly started doing interviews and now publishing a whole paper contradicting everything she worked so hard to achieve in her autism career. She now thinks that broadening our understanding of what autism is 30-odd years ago was a mistake. But not because it was bad science or she's come up with a better idea. She just thinks there's too many autistic people now. But rather than theorising or backing research into why that might be, she wants to split everything up again. I'm Quinn and I'm autistic, and today on Autismatic, I'm asking, what's going on with Uta Frith and her two-tier autism? A couple of years ago, the phrase two-tier was already a familiar one, but not one you'd use very often. Now, you can't get away from it. Well, I can't in the UK. You see it on the papers and the TV news, hear it on street corners, in the barber shop and down the local pub. It entered the zeitgeist as a soundbite and then one of many catchphrases of Nigel Farage, the former owner and on-and-off leader of a UK limited company called Reform, which occupies a fuzzy space in between right-wing populist political party, a personal vanity project, a marketing company and a lobbying cum pressure group. He popularised it when complaining about what he claimed was a double standard in the application of UK law against his supporters during a notorious series of racially motivated riots, and being a catchy rhyme with the then Prime Minister's name probably helped. Even those who don't agree with Farage's particular interpretation still ask their own questions about the fairness of our legal systems, though, something that's inevitable in any free-speaking society. Fairness is in the eye of the beholder, after all, so it will always be open to question. And people who value freedom and truth really should appreciate asking and being asked questions, for what good is freedom to any of us without the exchange of ideas? Which is why I've no objection in principle to Uta Frith, Dame Uta Frith, sticking her oar in and saying her piece right now. We're both lucky to live in a democratic, free society, so she's as much right to speak her mind as I have, even if I'm rather puzzled by what she's been saying lately. Whilst Nigel will undoubtedly be very pleased to hear Uta's new direction, they're coming at the two-tier thing from different angles. Nigel likes to complain about other people's two-tier systems, whilst Uta wants to introduce one. She's taken a long, hard look at the autism world as it is now, 20 years after she stopped taking an active role, and what she sees displeases her. Where once she saw the fertile fields she tended with her farmhands, Baron Cohen, Atwood, Happy and all, now she sees a poison jungle of tainted diagnoses, misguided advocacy and disability tourism. Her solution? Change the diagnosis itself, so that most of us aren't autistic anymore. But she's not proposing going back to the bad old days before the spectrum. No, nothing like that. We should, she says, make it even harder than it was then and introduce even more barriers to diagnosis than we had back in the 1980s. Then we can have our two new tiers. Proper autism, and she can't think of a name for it yet, but probably call it something else that isn't autism. Autism. One thing Dame Uta and I have in common is making a living talking about autism. I'm not retired though, and I still have to pay the bills. So if you like what I do here, and maybe fancy an extra Autismatic video every week, come and join me over on Patreon. Or you can just buy me a coffee on Ko-fi if you prefer. Plus, subscribing, liking, hyping and all that malarkey doesn't half make a difference to how many viewers get to see my work in their feeds, so I really appreciate it. Dame Uta, claims that clinicians overdiagnose autism now. In her shiny new opinion, modern diagnosticians are too liberal in their willingness to issue autism diagnoses compared to her days. Days when, according to her, they could often diagnose at first sight. Wow! Maybe that was the first true autism superpower. But these days, she believes the doctors and psychologists who gatekeep autism diagnoses are too afraid of their patients to give them a straight answer. So everyone gets a diagnosis. She claims autism to be a fashionable diagnosis and imagines people declaring themselves autistic on a whim to gain social clout or to excuse their failures. Plus, she casts doubt on the validity of the increase in autistic women getting diagnosed in recent years. All of this combined is, in her view, unsustainable. There's too many people just claiming to be autistic now, and there's too many getting diagnosed as well, she thinks. So we must thin out the numbers before it gets out of hand. We need a new dividing line. But where to put it? Maybe we could say that the only proper autistic people are the ones with intellectual or learning disabilities, and especially those who don't speak. Anything else labelled as autism right now wouldn't cut it anymore. She's willing to accept that the rest of us have something different about us. She's okay with that, but we shouldn't call it autism anymore. We can pick another name that we like, but leave off the autism. You'd no longer be able to be just autistic, or even ADHD and autistic under the New World Autism, because autism still counts as autism only if there's another entirely separate medical condition piled either side of it. Autism can be the filling in a disability sandwich, but you wouldn't be served it on its own. Sound familiar? If you're thinking that her new view of real proper autism is practically identical to the profound autism that lobbyists and vested interests have been pushing for years, then you wouldn't be alone. If you remember the video I made only a couple of weeks back about the proposals SciShow reported on, they had a similar category too they called broadly affected, and another one that wrote off the majority of autistic people as not really autistic as well. Huh. Uta's new suggestion is just another severity scale like that one was, and that we have already. Only this time she's bundled 3 out of their 4 tiers into one and wants a new name for it altogether. This is the main driver behind much of the conspiratorial gossip about Dame Uta's change of heart. It's clearly nothing new. Every single argument is one that's already been done to death by experts in the community alike. They've been chopped, sautéed, served and washed down with a nice Chianti, thank you very much. So why is someone who most definitely knows better coming out with this hogwash? And why now? People are people, including when they're autistic people. So some of the proposed explanations being put forward aren't terribly kind or even plausible. Some of them are close to full-fledged conspiracy theories in my view, but not all of them are far-fetched. As to those calling for some kind of formal investigation, well, she's retired, so will that achieve much? She can't be struck off from any professional bodies as far as I know, and whilst all this current nonsense has potential to do real-world damage, she hasn't, as far as I can tell, broken any laws. Admittedly, if it did turn out there was something dodgy or under the table about her abrupt change of heart, then it would make a laughingstock of her and her new arguments, and that would make for an ignominious end to an illustrious career, but that ball might already be rolling anyway. Let's get one thing straight though. Dame Uta, has led a long and distinguished career in her field. Her name is attached to several landmark papers that have shaped the conversation around autism for decades and will remain relevant for years to come. Students of hers have gone on to be the researchers and theorists of the modern age, and the folks rising up the ranks to replace them now all studied Dame Uta's past work. Whatever else happens from here, that legacy will remain, at least in some form. Now, it's a bit of an elephant in the room, but it would be churlish to ignore the role Uta's age could play in all this. I've no inside knowledge about her health or medical history, nor do I want to pry, but I do think that before any of us assume the worst and start assigning ulterior motives or pointing to outside influences, we should stop to consider age as a possible explanation. I'm not saying go soft on her because she's old, but I do know that age, or an age-related condition, is a viable explanation. We remember things differently when we're older sometimes, reevaluate things through mature, wiser lenses, and sometimes come to different conclusions to ones we're used to. In families, long before anybody starts talking about care homes or even seeing a doctor, plenty of people notice their older relatives or their spouses getting a bit surly and more reactionary as they get older. Memories fail them more frequently. They get less tolerant, quicker to judge, and generally grumpier. Sometimes short-tempered too. The bitter cynicism of Alf Garnett or his US equivalent Archie Bunker wouldn't sit right on the shoulders of a younger man. There's a specific kind of belligerent, contrarian thinking that we associate specifically with old age. So I'll leave speculation about why the polar shift happened to other people. Quite honestly, any explanation that isn't just old age or the loss of a few marbles is going to be a disappointment, let alone a scandal. But I do see why such speculation is rife. Ever since publishing her new views in the Times educational supplement a few weeks ago, Dame Uta, has declined to engage with anyone to discuss or even defend her new views. And it's not for lack of opportunity. Autistic people aren't exactly surprised to get blanked, though. Whilst it would be nice for the research and medical side of autism to engage with and include us as participants rather than just test subjects, a lot don't seem to see us that way. It's daft that's how it is, but we're realists here, aren't we? But you really would have expected her to pipe back when the National Autistic Society raised alarm bells, or when former colleagues and students started being quoted in the media disagreeing with her. When you think of all the work she's put in towards defining and measuring theory of mind, it's astonishing to suggest that she, of all people, can't read the signals. Assuming she's still firing on all cylinders, of course. If she's not, then we really needn't look any further. There was bound to be speculation, just because this is such a sudden and dramatic turnaround. But it takes more than that to get the gossip minds grinding out fresh plausibilities by the bucket load like this has. Remember I said that there's nothing new about this proposal of hers? There's a small, but very loud and online group of folks who've historically poo-pooed academics like Dame Uta, because they blame the modern autism spectrum for many of their woes, from not getting enough sympathy anymore to the paucity of government assistance. Alongside a loose alliance of moneyed interests, political influencers and a smattering of turncoat scientists, they've been campaigning to ring-fence autism all to themselves and give it new names for years. They want a whacking great dividing line between what they want us to believe is real or profound autism and whatever namby-pamby wishy-washy nonsense the rest of us have. And then here comes Dame Uta, one of the architects of the very spectrum they so despise, flipping the script on its head like she's had a revelation from above. An overnight conversion, no less. She's their champion now because she's confirming what they knew all along. Thing is, overnight Damascus moments like those are quite common in the world we live in now. It's not that unusual for a public figure, a celebrity or an academic to publicly switch their opinions out and take an equally, sometimes even stronger viewpoint to the opposite of whatever they've been known for before. We've had a rash of it with politicians all over the world, certainly here in the UK. It's become a joke over here, following the trail of politicians who feel the wind going out of their party's sails and then defect to another politically opposed party, overnight claiming to believe in policies, principles and even morals completely contradictory to yesterday. Figures like Robert Jenrick, Nadeem Zahawi and Suella Braverman come to mind immediately. Once prominent, headline-worthy cabinet members in government only a couple of years ago now jumped ship and standing behind new lecterns, ridiculing, decrying the very policies and decisions they conceived of and they enforced whilst in government. Publicly betraying not only colleagues, but the work and principles they staked their reputation on just a few news cycles ago. Celebrities finding God is one that's so old it was a cliche when I was a kid. Get caught out one too many times being a debauched, dirty little scroat, and watch your career go down the pan because nobody likes a pervert or an abuser. Game over! Unless you just can't give up the attention. Then you can go out of sight for a little while, buy yourself a couple of white linen suits and book a photographer for a few moody shots carrying a Bible or a Quran. Bam! Brand new audience and a reborn reputation. Not as much fun as the last one, but hey, you've still got an audience, and it's better than being a penniless nobody. Bankrupted businessmen flip 180s. Ex-cons do it. Everybody who has a job or a reputation they're trying to hang on to is likely to consider it at some point. People reinventing themselves to integrate into a new group is nothing new, but it demands a sacrifice to be truly accepted. One must atone at the altars of those new gods, and no better way than blowing the whistle on the world they've left. Sticking their knife in. They're not demonstrating their new loyalty by an act of faith, but by showing them just how desperate they are to be allowed in. But they'll never be what they used to be. Their old group won't accept them back after their betrayal, and the new group will never fully trust them because treachery was their price of admission. They knew they were a snake in the grass the moment they let them in the door. But all those people were failing in some way when they flip-flopped. They were elected out of office, or they jumped ship when their party was unpopular. They got caught stealing or philandering, lying, cheating, rigging something, or in some way disgracing themselves. But what scandal has Dame Uta, got herself into? Apart from this one, of course. She's a retired academic, a still well-renowned expert in her field, and a Dame of the British Empire, to give her the full title. Like any prominent expert, there were undoubtedly a few folks around the world who didn't think much of her or her work, but on the whole, before this she seemed to be enjoying a sort of elder statesman of autism research role. Not an active participant in the work, but still highly competent and clued in enough to the current state of the field as to be reliable for commentary and interview. Yet now it all lies in tatters, and nobody can work out why. A few months before the Times Ed interview, she specifically stated that she had no belief in a rise in autism, explaining it as an illusion created by better availability of diagnosis. Yet now somehow she's riding the too many autistics train. Imagine if, in his final years, whilst the Marvel franchise was dominating summer cinema screens, Stan Lee had done a press interview saying, "Hey kids, comics rot your brains and imagination is for losers." It's that daft. Sorry for the bad impression, by the way. Speculation as to Dame Uta's motivation has so far ranged from the venal through to the bizarre, and without any feedback or response to the people most affected by her proposals, nature will fill that informational vacuum. The thing is, Uta could be a force for good if she really wants to be. Instead of turning her back on most of her life's work, she could lend her voice and her credibility to blessing the good work that's being done now. Learn a bit more about what we now know about autistic empathy, for instance, and celebrate how far we've come from the work she did decades ago. Sadly now, that credibility is draining away fast. Yes, she's gained herself new notoriety in spades, but most of it isn't going in a direction that helps anyone autistic, whether or not we fit into her new vision. She's, in effect, aligning herself with people who live under the delusion that everyone else agrees with their controversial points of view but are afraid of saying so. her proposals line up very neatly with the stated political objectives of political parties here in the UK and abroad. The aforementioned Farage and his reform company employees are brazen in their intent to gut what's left of the welfare system here, and their political equivalents in the US and elsewhere are no less eager to destroy all our social safety nets. Those folks are very keen to hear what Dame Uta's got to say too. Two-tier autism is something a few of them have been having wet dreams about for years. If austerity is your aim, then compliant experts are gold dust when you're challenged to justify it. Which is why the timing of Uta's revelatory conversion, combined with the utterly ridiculous rhetoric about vaccines, acetaminophen and God knows what else coming out of the US lately, raises so many alarm bells. Governments, even the not-so-bad ones, are looking for ways to streamline their welfare and medical systems, and Uta's dangling a dirty great carrot right in front of them. Except it's a poisoned carrot, because they won't find the savings they're looking for in autism, not by far, because very few people get benefits just because they're autistic. Hardly anybody I talk to in the UK gets any disability benefits on the basis of autism alone, because the system isn't set up that way. Most of those that do get help already fit into Dame Uta's new view of who should be getting help anyway. Our system suspects every applicant of fraud before their forms are even submitted, and so we have to provide lots and lots of independent corroborating evidence. Having a condition doesn't give you a ticket to free money, accommodation, assistance or favours, especially not when it's an invisible disability. You have to jump through countless hoops to prove you're disabled enough and be on the ball against being tricked, even if you roll over the assessor's toes in your wheelchair and have a seizure in their office. So how easy do you think it is for someone who, as the naysayers like to put it, is just a bit socially awkward? The ideologues believe, deep down in the darkest depths of their hearts, that there's a huge well of borderline disability claimants who aren't that bad actually. They're lazy people who game the system to avoid work and responsibility. They imagine people demanding autism diagnoses from doctors too timid to refuse, and a benefit system that takes their word for it and rubber stamps it. There's a broader picture here though, which is why interventions like Uta's cause so much concern. Farage and his ilk have their budget-slashing shears paused over all disabled folks, with us invisible autists, ADHDers and folks with mental health problems merely at the leading edge of cuts so deep not one of us will remain unblooded. They know there's a huge gap in the public's knowledge of the autism, neurodivergence and mental health space. And with no visible disabilities to elicit sympathy, it's easy for them to fill the void with conflation, misinformation and suspicion. When they try to act on the new advice, it'll blow up in their face. There'll be no release of funds back into the kitty because very few people that Dame Uta is proposing disenfranchising actually can claim disability benefits. Not here. Plenty of autists are on long-term unemployment benefits though, just the same as anyone else out of work is entitled to. But they get no extra payments, privileges or dispensations because of their autism. Something could be done about that situation with just a few million quid of public education and better enforcement of existing employment legislation, but nobody seems keen on that. I mean, what a bother. They think we're all autistic welfare queens living the life of Riley, apparently. Whatever the reasons for it, and no matter who tries to take advantage of it, Dame Uta, has chosen to end her professional career on a very low note. One that aligns her with people who really don't have the best interests of autistic or disabled people at heart. To the autistic community and to disabled people as a whole, it's a betrayal just as deep as a politician crossing the aisle or a best friend stabbing us in the back. It's a low blow to the people she spent a lifetime claiming to care about. Whilst some former colleagues and compatriots have tried to defend or recontextualise her comments to tamp down the controversy, she's remained steadfastly silent on the matter so far. They'll only put up with that for so long before they have to start thinking of their own credibility, their own futures as academics and researchers. Most will prefer to simply distance themselves from her and hope nobody mentions any of this. but one or two may well feel obliged to publicly denounce her and be seen to take a stand, because at the end of it, none of what she says adds up, nor is much of it supported by the patchwork of dubious evidence she's put forward. But above all, anyone in this field knows that the two-tier system she's proposing doesn't work and can't work because the dividing lines she proposes don't fix anything. They make it more complicated and might actually lead to more people claiming in the long run. My friend Mike over on the Autistic AF channel has done a superb point-by-point breakdown of the paper Uta wrote to justify her about-face. So if you'd like to get into the nuts and bolts of her arguments in detail, I strongly recommend you go take a look. I'll link it above and below. I put the question to my friends and community. What would you ask Uta if you were given the chance? Or if we could choose the interviewer's questions and follow-up in her next press interview, what would we want them to say? I got back a long list of queries about glaring hypocrisies, contradictions and thorny moral incontinuities that would provide for a fascinating insight into her mind and motivations, but they all boiled down to the same question. Given that the proposal is nonsense, the evidence backing it doesn't support it, it's a total contradiction of previous positions, and it's almost identical to already discarded proposals to reclassify autism, why are you now promoting two-tier autism? However many more papers or interviews Uta does, I think this is going to be a storm in a teacup in the long run. Yes, there's going to be some argy-bargy and some folks will get upset, but this intervention really won't shift the dial very much. Certainly not up against anything that's peer-reviewed or conducted with any sense of method. Just like the idiocy coming from RFK Jr. and his boss over in the US. It doesn't matter how loudly they shout about foreskins or painkillers or whatever other baloney they're cooking up to cast as the autism boogeyman. Spoiler, it's going to be vaccines. Because everybody outside the US knows it's bullshit. We smile politely as they make willing fools of themselves, but no one's following their lead. They're blowing hot air, shouting into the wind. They're wasting their bloody time because it takes more than a red-faced or orange-faced man shouting scary stories and fake numbers at us to change truly objective, evidence-respecting minds. The sort of mind you normally find inside the head of a retired Cambridge professor, you'd think. Dame Uta's recent forays into the public eye have upset many, many autistic people all over the world, and plenty of those who care about us too. And she risks alienating people who might once have considered her a valuable and respected colleague. Benefit of doubt will erode, and any legacy from her previous contributions will become permanently tainted by what's already perilously close to a fall from grace. Outside of a complete retraction and a viable explanation for why she did it in the first place, I don't see there's many ways of salvaging her reputation going forward. I'm Quinn, and I'm autistic. Thank you for spending time with me.